The first scream I heard that day wasn't from a battlefield or a mission gone wrong, it came from my wife. And it didn't come from miles away over a radio, it came from just outside our front door. I had promised myself, after years of service as a Navy SEAL, that my retirement would be quiet. I'd bought us a modest house in a neighborhood tucked away from the chaos of city life, where the loudest sound was supposed to be kids playing or lawnmowers humming on a Saturday morning. I thought peace had finally found me. I thought I had left war behind. I was wrong. When I opened the door that morning, my wife, Sarah, was on the ground, her hands clutched over her ribs, while two men in dark polo shirts with HOA enforcement patches stood over her. One had his arm raised like he was ready to strike again. My vision tunneled. Every instinct I had buried since leaving the military came flooding back. "Hey," I roared, my voice carrying the weight of every command I'd ever given in combat. "Step away from her." The men froze, but only for a moment. One sneered. She refused to comply. HOA rules. Trash cans can't stay out past 8 a.m. She thought she could talk back. Talk back. They had assaulted my wife over garbage bins. My hands trembled. Not from fear, but from the sheer effort it took not to unleash the storm brewing inside me. I knelt beside Sarah first, checking her injuries. She looked up at me, eyes watering, and whispered, "I'm okay, please don't." But I could see the bruise already forming on her ribs. And I could feel the fire rising inside me. I stood slowly, deliberately. "You boys made the worst mistake of your lives today." They tried to puff themselves up, hiding their nerves behind arrogance. One stepped forward. "Look, old man, this is HOA business. You don't want to get involved." I smiled then. A cold, practiced smile. The kind I used to wear before a mission that would change everything. "Son, you just got involved with me." Before they could react, I moved. Years of training weren't something retirement could erase. With one swift motion, I caught the man's wrist as he swung at me, twisted, and dropped him face first into the grass. The other lunged, but I sidestepped, sweeping his legs out from under him and pressing my knee to his chest before he could scramble up. Both men were groaning in the dirt, their arrogance shattered. I leaned down, my voice low and steady. "If you ever come near my wife again, if you ever lay a hand on her, you won't just be dealing with HOA complaints, you'll be dealing with me." They scrambled off the ground, muttering threats, but I knew fear when I saw it. They left, and I carried Sarah inside, my hands shaking now for a different reason. I was terrified, not of them, but of how close I had come to losing her. That night, as I iced her ribs, Sarah whispered, "You can't fight everyone, Jack. We'll never find peace if we keep running into people like this." She was right, but I wasn't about to let them think they owned us. So instead of more violence, I fought the only way I knew how, head on, but with discipline. I filed police reports, documented Sarah's injuries, and reached out to neighbors who had also been bullied by the HOA enforcers. Slowly, stories trickled in. Fines for minor things, intimidation at doorsteps, threats of foreclosure. People had stayed quiet out of fear. But fear doesn't work when you've faced worse than death. I organized meetings, gave the neighbors a voice, and together, we built a case. Weeks later, the HOA board and their so-called enforcers were facing criminal charges for assault, harassment, and extortion. The neighborhood finally breathed freely again, knowing justice had landed. One afternoon, as Sarah and I sat on the porch watching kids ride their bikes down the street, she leaned against me and said softly, "You didn't just protect me, you protected everyone." I kissed her hair and smiled. That's what I was trained to do. And for the first time since retiring, I realized something. Peace doesn't mean avoiding battles. Sometimes it means choosing the right ones. And this one was worth every ounce of the fight. The days after the assault were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and hushed conversations with neighbors who had been living under the HOA's iron fist for years. Every time I saw Sarah wince when she reached for a coffee mug or stood too quickly, my resolve hardened. I had faced warlords, insurgents, and pirates on the other side of the world, but nothing boiled my blood like seeing my wife hurt in our own driveway. The HOA enforcers thought they could silence us with fear. But fear only works when people feel alone. That's where they miscalculated. I started with a man named Frank, a quiet Vietnam veteran who lived 2 houses down. For years, The HOA had threatened him with eviction because he couldn't keep up with yard work due to his arthritis. He whispered his story to me like it was a confession, too scared to raise his voice. Then came Maria, a single mom fined hundreds of dollars because her kids left chalk drawings on the sidewalk. And the Harris family, who had been told to remove a swing set because it clashed with the community aesthetic. Each story was worse than the last. And with each one, I could feel the same anger burning in my neighbor's eyes that I felt in my own chest. The HOA had built its power on intimidation, but once people realized they weren't alone, something shifted. I wasn't just building a case, I was building a unit. We began gathering evidence. I taught my neighbors how to document everything: photos, videos, recordings. Every fine, every threat, every insult was logged. Soon, what we had wasn't just a collection of grievances, it was a full-blown dossier. But the HOA wasn't about to roll over. One evening, as I walked Sarah to the mailbox, a black SUV rolled up slowly. The window lowered, and one of the enforcers, the same man who had shoved her, leaned out. His lip was still bruised from where he'd kissed the ground the day I stopped him. "You think you're some kind of hero," he spat. "You're poking the wrong bear, old man. This is our neighborhood." I stepped between him and Sarah, my voice calm but cold. "No, this is our home, and it belongs to the people, not to bullies." He smirked. "We'll see about that." Then the SUV peeled off, leaving dust and the faint smell of burnt rubber behind. That night, Sarah looked at me with worried eyes. "Jack, what if they come after us harder? What if this escalates?" I took her hand. "Then they'll learn what real escalation looks like. But this time, it won't be fists or force. It'll be the truth. And the truth is stronger than any muscle they flex." Inside, though, I was uneasy. These men weren't just drunk with power, they were desperate to hold on to it. And desperate men are dangerous. The next week proved me right. It was just after midnight when I heard the crunch of footsteps outside. Years of military training meant I slept light, and the sound snapped me awake instantly. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Sarah, and grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the door. When I opened it, I caught a glimpse of two shadows darting away. My eyes dropped to the ground, and my stomach turned. Spray paint covered the driveway. "Get out or else." I clenched the bat so tight my knuckles turned white. They had crossed another line. This wasn't just harassment anymore, it was war. But unlike them, I knew how to fight wars and win them. The spray-painted threat on my driveway wasn't just an insult, it was a declaration. They wanted me scared, rattled, maybe even gone. Instead, all it did was remind me of something I'd nearly forgotten: I don't break under pressure. I pushed back. The next morning, I called a neighborhood meeting. Not in secret, not in whispers, out in the open, on my front lawn where the whole community could see. Dozens showed up. Some came nervously, looking over their shoulders as if the HOA board had eyes everywhere. Others came angry, tired of living under a rain of petty fines and midnight threats. And then there were the ones who came because they'd heard what happened to Sarah. That was the breaking point for many. I stood tall in front of them, a stack of evidence files in my hands. "These men think fear keeps them in control," I said, my voice carrying like it had so many times in the field. "But fear only works until people stop being afraid. They crossed the line when they laid a hand on my wife. And they crossed it again when they brought threats to my home. Enough is enough." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. For the first time, I saw the spark of defiance in their eyes. So, I laid out the plan, not just to fight back, but to win. Step 1. Documentation. Every single person was to record interactions with the enforcers. Phones at the ready, body cams if possible. If the HOA wanted to intimidate, we'd shine a spotlight on every move they made. Step 2. Unity. I taught them how we'd rotate watch groups at night. Nobody would stand alone. If a family got a threat, they wouldn't face it alone. We'd be there together. Step 3. Exposure. I had a buddy still in law enforcement. With the mountain of evidence we were gathering, photos, audio clips, medical records from Sarah's injuries, we now had more than enough to build a case. But I didn't just want to hand it over quietly. No, these bullies thrived in the dark. So we were going to drag them out into the light. We set up a neighborhood website, anonymous at first, where we posted every single story, every documented fine, every video of an enforcer screaming at residents. It spread faster than I expected. Local news picked it up. Suddenly, it wasn't just our neighborhood watching, the entire town was paying attention. That's when the HOA board panicked. They called an emergency meeting at their headquarters, a smug glass office building that looked more like a fortress. And they summoned me personally. Sarah begged me not to go alone, but I knew I had to walk in there. Not as a victim, not even as a fighter, but as a leader carrying the weight of my neighbors behind me. The room was filled with board members, stiff suits with smug smiles, and those same two enforcers sitting in the back, arms crossed, glaring at me like they wanted round two. One of the board members leaned forward. "Mr. Carson, you've caused quite the disruption. Perhaps you'd like to reconsider your actions before this escalates further." I leaned forward too, locking eyes with him. "It already escalated the moment your men put their hands on my wife. You want me to back down? Not happening. You want this to end? Then dissolve this crooked system you're running, or I'll make sure the courts, the police, and every single news outlet in this city do it for you." The room went silent. The enforcers shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, I saw cracks in their armor. Walking out of that building, I knew one thing: they weren't going to give up quietly. Not after years of ruling unchecked. They were cornered animals now. And cornered animals always strike hardest before they fall. So I prepared. Because if there's one thing the Navy taught me, it's this: hope for peace, but train for war. For weeks, the pressure built like a storm waiting to break. The HOA board had stopped pretending to be professional. Instead, their enforcers prowled the streets more aggressively, handing out bogus fines, knocking on doors at midnight, and lurking near our houses like wolves circling prey. But the difference now: nobody was alone. Our neighborhood watch rotations were running smoothly. Phones were always recording, and every time an enforcer tried to intimidate someone, that video went straight onto our website. The public backlash was snowballing. Reporters camped at the edge of the neighborhood. The HOA had gone from untouchable to infamous overnight. Still, I knew they weren't done. Desperation breeds recklessness. And I was right. It happened on a Friday night. I was in the living room with Sarah when the sudden crash of breaking glass echoed from the backyard. I was on my feet instantly, instincts sharp as ever. I pushed Sarah toward the safe room we had prepared just in case. By the time I reached the back door, 3 masked figures had slipped onto the porch, armed with bats and crowbars. They weren't here to scare us this time. They were here to finish it. But I wasn't the same as the people they'd bullied before. I was trained for moments exactly like this. I didn't charge. I didn't yell. I waited. Calm, patient, letting them take one more step inside. Then I moved. The first man swung his bat. I ducked low, driving my shoulder into his ribs and sending him crashing into the wall. The second lunged, but a twist of his wrist and his crowbar clattered to the floor. A knee to his gut dropped him gasping. The third froze, his courage failing him when he realized I wasn't the old, harmless retiree they thought I was. I stared him down. "Tell your bosses," I growled, "this neighborhood doesn't belong to them anymore." By the time the police arrived, thanks to our neighbors already calling, those enforcers were sprawled on the ground, groaning in defeat. And the cameras caught everything. The arrest that followed wasn't just the end of a fight, it was the end of an era. The enforcers were charged with assault and intimidation, and the board members soon found themselves under investigation for fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. Their empire of fear collapsed overnight. But what mattered most wasn't just their downfall. It was what rose in its place. In the weeks after, our neighborhood transformed. Without the shadow of the HOA looming, people smiled more. Kids played freely. Neighbors who barely spoke before were sharing meals together. The very streets that once felt suffocating were now alive with laughter and light. One evening, Sarah and I sat on the porch, listening to the sound of children chasing each other down the block. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "You didn't just protect me, Jack. You gave us all back our freedom." I wrapped my arm around her, looking out over the community we had fought for. "I didn't do it alone," I said softly. "We did it together. That's the difference. For years, I thought my battles were behind me. I thought retiring meant walking away from the fight. But I learned something here. In this quiet neighborhood far from war zones and battlefields, some fights are worth standing for, not because of duty or orders, but because of love. And protecting the people you love. That's the greatest mission of all.